Picture a creaky Colorado cabin under a moonless sky where a young girl's screams were silenced by the one man she trusted most. I'm Clara Bennett, and at 13 my father drugged me with a bitter tea, hissing "our secret," as he abused me for years, until my mother heard the truth that shattered our lives. Each night, I drowned in terror, my childhood stolen by his vile hands, my cries buried under his poison. But the darkest betrayal was yet to come, a secret so twisted it'll chill your blood. Can I escape his grip, or will his shadow destroy us all? Stay for a twist so shocking it'll tear your heart apart. If this grips your soul, smash that like button, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Let's stand united. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and don't miss a second of this gut-wrenching tale of betrayal, survival, and a mother's desperate fight. The truth will leave you stunned. That creaky Colorado cabin wasn't just a setting. It was the cage where my innocence was shattered, a nightmare I couldn't escape. I'm Clara Bennett, and I'm here to pull you into a story so raw it'll pierce your soul, a tale of betrayal so deep it'll leave you breathless. If you felt the chill of my words just now, hold on tight, because this journey through darkness and hope will grip you to your core. If you've ever felt trapped by someone you trusted, comment "I'm here" below, and let's walk this path together. Smash that like button, subscribe, and keep this truth alive. Picture Maplewood, Colorado in the 1960s, a sleepy little town where rugged mountains loomed over endless fields and secrets festered like a quiet rot beneath the surface. It was the kind of place where folks waved from porches, but never pried, where Sunday sermons drowned out cries for help. Our house, a sagging wooden cabin on the town's edge, wasn't a home. It was a battlefield. The air inside reeked of pipe grease and bourbon, the walls shuddering under my father's wrath. Richard Bennett, my father, was a broad-shouldered plumber with hands like steel traps and a temper that could crack stone. To him, I was nothing. A daughter, a burden, a shadow in his world. "You're just a girl, Clara," he'd sneer, his voice cutting sharper than any knife. His pride, his obsession, was keeping me under his control. Richard Bennett was Maplewood's everyman, a hard-working father, a gruff but reliable plumber who fixed leaks and unclogged drains. With his piercing gray eyes and a grin that could charm a snake, he was the town's go-to guy. Neighbors tipped their hats saying, "Richard's a good man." But I saw what they didn't. Those eyes didn't just shine, they smoldered, tracking me with a hunger that made my skin crawl. He'd pull me onto his lap at barn dances, his grip too tight, while folks smiled. What a loving dad. My mother, Margaret, was a wisp in our home, small, worn, her hands calloused from sewing dresses for the town's ladies. She'd murmur, "Stay out of trouble, Clara," her eyes avoiding mine, as if silence could shield us from the storm. I was 7 when Richard's shadow first touched me, subtle but chilling. He'd barge into the bathroom while I bathed, his grin too wide. "Don't be silly, Clara," he'd say, his voice a low growl. "I'm your daddy." I'd shrink, covering myself, a knot twisting in my gut. I'd beg him to leave, but he'd chuckle, like it was a game. Margaret saw it once. Her face paled, but she turned away, threading her needle with trembling hands. Her silence was a betrayal, louder than any scream, leaving me to face a monster alone. In Maplewood, girls didn't speak out. We obeyed, we endured, we survived, or we didn't. Our cabin was a prison of warped planks and broken dreams. The living room held Richard's toolbox, cluttered with wrenches and empty bottles, the kitchen a haze of thread and despair. Richard and Margaret shared a bedroom, its door always locked, while I slept in a back room, the walls so thin I could hear his heavy boots. As a little girl, I'd been his doll. He'd fix my toys, race me through the fields, call me his treasure. But as I grew, his affection twisted, turning possessive, predatory. By 8, he'd linger at my bedside, his fingers grazing my arm. "Don't tell," he'd whisper, his breath hot. I'd lie rigid, praying he'd leave, but the darkness in him was waking, and I was its target. Margaret tried to protect me, in her frail way. She'd tug me to her sewing table, teaching me to stitch hems, her voice soft but quaking. "You're my little helper, Clara," she'd say, but Richard would scoff. "She's mine, Margaret," he'd boom. "Let her be." To him, family meant I was his to own, his to break. The town echoed his praise. Teachers called him a provider. Neighbors envied our perfect family. But behind our splintered front door, a nightmare was brewing, one that would shatter my spirit. The 1960s in Maplewood were a time of stifling tradition. Women stayed quiet, abuse was private, and girls like me were taught to bear their pain. No one questioned Margaret's exhaustion or my hollow eyes. Church ladies preached forgiveness, their smiles as sharp as their judgment. I learned to hide my fear, to smile when Richard's hand lingered, to lie when teachers asked why I flinched at loud voices. But inside, I was screaming, begging for someone to see me, to save me. If you're out there, carrying that same silent weight, comment, "I'm here." Your voice matters, and so does mine. This story is for you, for every girl trapped in a house that's more cage than home. As you hear what's coming, you'll witness a betrayal so cruel it'll make your blood run cold, a fight for survival that'll tear your heart, and a secret so dark it'll change everything. Don't turn away, because what happened in that mountain cabin set the stage for a war I never chose, but had to win. Richard's darkness, Margaret's silence, my stolen innocence, they were the sparks that lit a fire in me, one that would either burn me alive or set me free. If this story's pulling you in, smash that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's keep this truth blazing. The worst is yet to come, and you won't believe the battle ahead. You're still here, and I'm so grateful, because the darkness that haunted that Colorado cabin is about to break me apart. My name's Clara Bennett, and what I'm about to share will chill your bones and shatter your heart. The betrayal I faced in that Maplewood house wasn't just a scar. It was a war, one that stole every shred of my innocence. If you felt the weight of my story so far, brace yourself, because the nightmare is just beginning, and it's more horrifying than you can imagine. Comment "I'm here" below, and let's face this together. Smash that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. I was 7 when my father's shadow first crept into my life, but by 9, it had claws that tore into my soul. Our cramped bedroom in Maplewood, Colorado was a suffocating trap, the walls pressing in as Richard's obsession grew. He was 33, his gray eyes sharp as daggers, his voice too knowing for a father. He'd slip into my room at night, the creak of the floorboards a warning, his breath hot against my neck as he whispered, "You're my doll, Clara, always mine." I'd freeze, my heart pounding so hard I thought it'd break, praying it was a dream. But his hands were real, tracing my arms, lingering where they shouldn't. I'd push him away, whispering, "Stop, Daddy." He'd laugh, low and chilling, like he knew I was powerless. In that house, I tried to tell my mother Margaret one evening, as she stitched a dress in the kitchen, her hands trembling from exhaustion. "Daddy's scaring me, Mom," I said, my voice barely a squeak. Her needle paused, her eyes darting to the door, fear etching her face. I saw it. She suspected something, but she shook her head, her voice brittle. "He's just playing, Clara." "Don't make trouble." Her words were a slap, her silence a cage. I stood there, a child begging for safety, but all I got was a mother too broken to see the truth. Margaret's fear of Richard was a chain, and I was bound by it, left to face a monster alone. Richard was my tormentor, my captor. He'd stumble home from fixing pipes, reeking of bourbon, his laughter booming as he tossed me a broken toy. "Fix it yourself, Clara," he'd roar, pulling me onto his lap while neighbors watched, blind to the truth. To him, I was his possession, his pride, his shame. "Why can't you be sweeter, Clara?" He'd snap, his eyes icy. I was invisible unless I fought back, and then his hand spoke. Once, when I dropped a glass, he slapped me so hard my cheek swelled. "Clean it up, you clumsy thing," he growled. He'd watch, smirking, knowing he was untouchable. By 10, Richard's games turned vicious. He'd wait until the house was silent, the only sound Margaret's soft snores and the howl of the wind outside. He'd creep to my bed, his weight sinking the mattress, his hands bolder now. "Don't scream," he'd hiss, pinning my wrists, his voice a venomous growl. "Mommy'll think you're lying, and you know what I do to liars." I knew. I'd seen Margaret's bruised wrists, her shattered spirit. So I bit my tongue, tears soaking my pillow, as Richard stole pieces of me I'd never reclaim. Each night, I'd curl up, praying for dawn, but morning only brought more shame. School was no refuge. Maplewood's tiny schoolhouse buzzed with whispers about Richard's grit. Teachers called him a hard worker. Kids envied my patched dresses. I'd slink to the back, hiding the shadows under my eyes, my grades slipping as fear consumed me. My teacher, Miss Harper, noticed once. "Clara, are you all right?" she asked, her voice gentle. I wanted to scream, to spill everything, but Richard's threat echoed. "I'll send you to an orphanage." So I lied. "I'm okay, ma'am." She frowned, unsure, but didn't push. In Maplewood, no one pushed. Secrets were buried deeper than the mountain snow. The nightmare deepened at 11 on a bitter February night in 1967. Richard was 36, his cruelty sharper than ever. He didn't just sneak in, he forced his way, his hands rough, his voice a snarl. "You're mine, Clara, and you'll take it." I fought, clawing his arm, but he was too strong, his laughter a knife in my chest. The pain was a fire, a violation I couldn't escape, tearing through my body and soul. When it was over, he stood, wiping blood from his arm. "Clean up," he sneered, leaving me trembling, my innocence in tatters. Days later, I changed. Nightmares woke me screaming. My appetite vanished, my body a map of shame. I'd hide in the attic, sobbing, the cold seeping into my bones, but Richard knew. He saw the fear in my eyes. One evening, as I mended a dress, he leaned close, his breath hot. "You're growing up, Clara," he whispered, his smirk chilling. "Soon you'll need something to keep you quiet." I dropped the needle, the prick echoing my dread. "Leave me alone," I hissed, but he gripped my arm, nails biting. "Tell anyone, and I'll make sure they never find you." His gray eyes gleamed, and I shuddered, trapped by his lies. Margaret's blindness was my prison. She'd slip me extra bread, her hands quaking, but her eyes never met mine. "You're so pale, Clara," she'd murmur, as if thread could mend my broken spirit. But time was my enemy. By 12, my silence was a noose, a truth I couldn't voice. If this story's gripping you, don't go anywhere. The storm's about to break, and what happens next will leave you reeling. Smash that like button, subscribe, and comment, "I'm here to stand with me." Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. The truth is coming, and it's darker than you can imagine. The terror in that Maplewood cabin grew heavier with each passing night, a noose tightening around my soul. I was 12, a hollow shell of the girl I'd once been. My father's abuse a poison seeping deeper into my bones. Richard's control was absolute, his threats a cage I couldn't escape, and my mother's blindness a wall I couldn't break. If you're still here, feeling this dread grip your heart, thank you. Comment, "I'm here" below, and let's face this darkness together. Smash that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. By 1968, Richard's cruelty had carved me empty. Our cabin in Maplewood, Colorado, was a tomb, the air thick with his bourbon-soaked rage. I'd hide the bruises under patched dresses, my body trembling at every creak of the floorboards. Richard was 37, his gray eyes colder than ever, his hands more brutal. He'd corner me in the attic, his voice a venomous hiss. "You're mine, Clara," he'd growl, his fingers digging into my arm. "Don't ever forget that." I'd flinch, my heart racing, but his smirk was a shackle, his threats a whip. "Tell anyone and I'll bury you in the mountains," he'd say, his knife glinting on his belt. I believed him. His fists had already broken me. Margaret, my mother, was a ghost, her hands calloused as she sewed. her eyes avoiding mine. She'd hum old lullabies, her voice quaking, as if songs could erase the truth. "You're so quiet, Clara," she'd say, threading her needle with shaky fingers. I wanted to scream, to tell her everything, but Richard's threats loomed. "Mommy'll never believe you," he'd sneer, his grip bruising my wrist. I'd tried once, whispering, "Daddy hurts me." But Margaret's face paled, her voice a plea. "Don't talk nonsense, Clara. He loves you." Her denial was a dagger, her exhaustion a shield for Richard's crimes. I was alone, a child drowning in a sea of silence. Richard's abuse grew bolder, his hands a constant violation. He'd wait until Margaret left for the seamstress shop, her satchel heavy with dresses, her steps weary with fatigue. He'd lock the door, his smirk chilling. "Just you and me, doll," he'd say, his knife on the table a silent threat. I'd fight, kicking at him, but he was too strong, his laughter a blade in my chest. "You'll take it," he'd growl, pinning me down. I'd escape in my mind, imagining mountain streams anywhere but that cabin, but the pain was real, a fire burning through my soul. Each time he'd leave me trembling, my body a map of shame. Maplewood turned a blind eye. At school, I was a ghost, my grades plummeting, my laughter gone. Kids whispered, "What's wrong with Clara?" But no one asked me directly. Miss Harper tried again, pulling me aside. "You look unwell, Clara," she said, her eyes soft. I wanted to tell her, but Richard's voice echoed, "They'll take you away." I lied. "I'm just tired," my voice hollow. She sighed but let it go. Maplewood didn't dig for secrets. Neighbors praised Richard, calling him a steady man, oblivious to the monster behind his grin. I'd see them at the market, their baskets full, while I prayed for escape. At 13, the nightmare turned darker. Richard's obsession deepened, his eyes lingering on my changing body. "You're growing up, Clara," he'd say, his voice a sick promise. "We need to keep you quiet now." I'd shrink, dread pooling in my gut, knowing something worse was coming. One night, in August 1969, he knocked on my door, a cup in hand. "I made you tea, doll," he said, his tone too sweet, too wrong. I froze. Richard never made tea. "I'm reading, Daddy," I stammered, but he pushed the door open, his foot blocking it. "Drink it," he ordered, his eyes glinting with malice. I stared at the murky liquid, my instincts screaming. It smelled bitter, not like chamomile. "I don't want it," I said, my voice shaking, but he grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "Drink it now," he roared, his face a mask of rage. I had no choice. His knife was on his belt, his threat in his eyes. I pretended to sip, tilting the cup, but he watched, unblinking. "All of it," he growled. I took a small sip, the bitterness burning my tongue, and faked another, spilling some on my dress. "It's good," I lied, but he didn't move, his smirk chilling. "Finish it," he said, his voice a death knell. I took another sip, my stomach twisting, and threw the rest under my bed when he turned to lock the door, praying I'd spilled enough. 20 minutes later, my body betrayed me, my vision blurred, my limbs heavy, a numbness creeping in. I stumbled, fighting the haze, but the door creaked open. Richard stood there, his smile a predator's grin. "Is the tea working, doll?" he whispered, his voice far away. I tried to scream, but my tongue was lead. "What did you put in it?" I slurred, my legs failing. He laughed, low and cruel. "Just something to make you relax," he said, stepping closer. "To enjoy our special moment." Terror consumed me. This wasn't like before. This was worse, a calculated evil I couldn't fight. This nightmare's only growing darker, and what happens next will leave you stunned. Don't turn away. Smash that like button, subscribe, and comment, "I'm here," to stand with me. Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. The horror's just beginning, and you won't believe what's coming. The numbness from that bitter tea was a prison, locking me inside my own body as Richard's shadow loomed over me in that Maplewood cabin. I was 13, my limbs heavy, my mind screaming, but my voice trapped by the drug he'd slipped into my drink. His special moment was a nightmare I couldn't escape, and the silence I'd kept for years was a noose I couldn't untie. If you're still here, feeling this horror claw at your heart, thank you. Comment "I'm here" below, and let's endure this together. Smash that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. That night in August 1969 was a descent into hell. Richard's smirk was a death sentence, his gray eyes glinting with a sick triumph as he approached. "Shh, doll," he whispered, his voice a venomous caress. "It's gonna be different tonight." I tried to crawl away, my nails scraping the floor, but the drug, a sedative, I'd later learn, kept me in a haze, aware but powerless. I felt his hands, heard his breath, sensed every violation, but I couldn't fight, couldn't scream. It was like drowning in a nightmare, my body a traitor, my mind trapped in terror. He'd planned this, used the tea to silence me, to break me further. When it was over, he stood, wiping his hands like he'd finished a chore. "Clean up," he sneered, leaving me trembling, my spirit in shards. The next morning, I woke aching, the drug's haze lingering, my body a map of shame. I scrubbed myself raw in the bath, but the filth wouldn't wash away. Richard acted like nothing had happened, fixing a pipe in the kitchen, whistling a tune. "You're looking pale, Clara," he said, his smirk chilling. I flinched, my stomach twisting, but Margaret was already at the seamstress shop, her absence a void he exploited. I hid in my room, the walls closing in, my mind replaying that night. I'd always fought to escape in my head, mountain streams, endless skies, but the drug had stolen even that refuge, leaving me raw, exposed, broken. Maplewood's silence was my prison. I stopped going to school, claiming sickness, but whispers spread like wildfire. "That Bennett girl's troubled," the church ladies muttered, their judgment a lash. I was a ghost in my own life, locked in that cabin, my only companion the fear that gnawed at me. Richard's visits didn't stop. He'd slip in at night, his knife on the nightstand, his voice a growl. "You liked the tea, didn't you?" He'd taunt, his hands a constant violation. I'd lie still, tears soaking my pillow, my mind a void. He'd drug me again, the bitter taste a harbinger of horror, each dose a chain binding me tighter. I changed, my body withered, my nails bitten to the quick, my eyes hollow. Margaret noticed, her hands trembling as she sewed. "Your skin and bones, Clara," she'd say, her voice a plea. I wanted to tell her, but Richard's threats echoed. "She'll never believe you." I'd tried once more, whispering, "He's hurting me." But she turned away, her calloused hands shaking. "Don't lie, Clara," she'd said, her eyes pleading. Her denial was a cage, her exhaustion a shield for his crimes. I was alone, a child drowning in despair. At 14, I found a spark of hope. Nora Evans, a new girl in Maplewood, moved in down the road, a bold spirit with hazel eyes and a laugh that cut through my gloom. We became friends, sharing secrets over apple cider at the market. One afternoon as we sat on her porch, she asked, "Why do you flinch when your dad's around?" My heart stopped. I thought I'd hidden it well. I wanted to lie, but I was tired, so tired of carrying that secret. "Nora, if I tell you something, will you swear not to tell?" I whispered, my voice breaking. She nodded, her eyes wide. "I promise, Clara, we're friends." I broke, the words spilling out like poison. I told her everything. The touches at 7, the kisses at 9, the drugged tea at 13, the nights I couldn't fight. "He hurts me, Nora," I sobbed, tears soaking my dress. "He says it's our secret, but it's killing me." Nora paled, her hands trembling as she hugged me tight. "Clara, that's abuse," she said, her voice shaking. "Your dad's a monster. You have to tell your mom." I shook my head, terror gripping me. "She won't believe me. It'll destroy us." Nora's eyes blazed. "He's already destroying you," she said, tears streaming. "If you don't tell her, I will." Her words were a spark, igniting a fire I didn't know I had. I was terrified, but Nora's courage gave me strength. I started planning, hiding coins in a jar, mapping bus routes to Denver, dreaming of escape. But Richard sensed my shift, his eyes sharper, his grip tighter. "You're too quiet, Clara," he'd sneer, his knife twirling. "What's going on in that head of yours?" I'd shrug, my heart racing, praying he wouldn't find my stash. Nora kept pushing, her voice a lifeline. "You can't keep living like this," she'd say, her hand on mine. "You deserve to be free." The tension in our cabin was a live wire, Richard's rage a storm waiting to break. I was a prisoner, my body a battlefield, Nora's fire my only hope. This storm's about to explode, and it's more brutal than you can imagine. Don't turn away, smash that like button, subscribe and comment, "I'm here to stand with me." Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. The fight's just starting, and you won't believe what's next. Nora's words, "If you don't tell, I will," were a fire igniting inside me, but Richard's shadow was a storm that refused to let me breathe in that Maplewood cabin. I was 14, my body a battlefield, my father's abuse a poison I couldn't escape, and my mother's silence a wall I couldn't break. But Nora's courage was a lifeline I clung to, even as terror gripped my soul. If you're still here, feeling this fear choke my heart, thank you. Comment, "I'm here" below, and let's stand against this darkness together. Smash that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. September 1969 was a gauntlet, each day a fight to survive Richard's wrath in Maplewood, Colorado. The cabin was a prison, its walls echoing with his bourbon-soaked rage, my jar of coins my only hope for escape. I'd hidden $120 under a loose floorboard, each penny a step toward freedom. But Richard's eyes were everywhere, his knife a constant threat. "You're too quiet, Clara," he'd growl, his grip bruising my arm. I'd flinch, my heart racing, praying he wouldn't find my stash. Nora was my rock, sneaking me apples from her orchard, her hazel eyes fierce. "We'll get you out," she'd whisper, her switchblade tucked in her pocket. But Richard sensed my rebellion, his control tightening like a noose. The breaking point came on a crisp October night. Margaret was at the seamstress shop, stitching dresses for a wedding order, her absence a void Richard exploited. I'd locked my door, my hands trembling as I counted my coins, the bus schedule to Denver crumpled in my pocket. But Richard had a spare key. I heard it turn, the creak a death knell. He stood in the doorway, a cup in hand, his smirk chilling. "I made you tea, doll," he said, his voice dripping with false sweetness. I froze, the bitter taste of that drugged chamomile haunting me. "I don't want it," I stammered, but he kicked the door open, his eyes glinting with malice. "Drink it," he ordered, his knife on his belt a silent threat. I backed away, my heart pounding. "No, Daddy, please," I begged, but he lunged, grabbing my wrist, his grip a vice. "Drink it now," he roared, his face a mask of rage. I had no choice. His knife was inches away, his threat in his eyes. I took the cup, my hands shaking, and pretended to sip, spilling some on the floor. But he watched, unblinking. "All of it," he growled, his voice a death sentence. I took a small sip, the bitterness burning, and threw the rest under my bed when he turned to lock the door. "Good girl," he sneered, stepping closer. "Let's make this special." The drug hit fast, my vision blurred, my limbs heavy, a haze creeping in. I stumbled, fighting the numbness, but Richard's hands were on me, his voice a venomous whisper. "Shh, doll," he said, pinning me to the bed. "It's gonna be perfect." I tried to scream, but my tongue was lead, my body a traitor. I felt every violation, his breath hot, his hands cruel, but I couldn't fight, couldn't flee. It was a nightmare I couldn't wake from, my mind trapped in terror. But then, a miracle. The front door slammed open, Margaret's voice cutting through the haze. "Richard, I'm home," she called, her steps quick. The bride canceled her order. Richard froze, panic flashing in his eyes. He hadn't expected her early. He tried to cover me, his hands shaking, but it was too late. Margaret burst into the room, her face a mask of horror as she saw me, drugged, trembling, my dress torn. "My God!" she screamed, her voice raw. "What are you doing?" Richard stumbled back, his lies spilling. "Margaret, it's not… she's sick. I was…" But Margaret's scream cut him off, a sound I'd never heard, primal, furious. "Get away from her!" she roared, lunging at him with a pair of sewing scissors she'd grabbed from her bag. She slashed at his arm, blood splattering, her voice a storm. "You monster!" Richard shoved her, his face twisted with rage, but Margaret fought like a lioness, her scissors grazing his chest. "I'll kill you!" she screamed, her eyes blazing with hatred. He grabbed her wrist, the scissors clattering to the floor, and bolted for the door, his blood staining the wood. "You'll regret this!" he bellowed, fleeing into the night. Margaret collapsed beside me, her hands trembling as she pulled me into her arms. "Clara, oh God, what did he do?" she sobbed, rocking me. I tried to speak, the drugs slurring my words. "Mom, he drugged me. He's been hurting me since I was 7. Her sobs turned to wails, her arms tightening around me. "I didn't know," she cried, her voice breaking. "I failed you, baby." "I'm so sorry." I clung to her, tears soaking her dress, the drug fading as the truth spilled out. I told her everything. The touches at 7, the kisses at 9, the drugged nights at 13, the years of terror. Margaret listened, her face crumpling, her guilt a tidal wave. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, her voice raw. "I was scared," I sobbed. "He said you wouldn't believe me." She held me tighter, her voice fierce. "I believe you now, and I'll make him pay." That night, Margaret called the sheriff, her voice shaking but resolute. 2 deputies arrived, their faces grim as they took our statements. "He drugged her," Margaret said, showing them the cup, her hands trembling. "He's been abusing her for years." They found Richard's blood, my torn dress, the traces of sedative in my system. "We'll find him," the older deputy promised, his voice kind. But Richard had vanished, a fugitive in the Colorado night, leaving me broken, but finally free to speak. This storm's at its peak, and the next twist will tear you apart. Don't turn away. Smash that like button, subscribe, and comment, "I'm here," to stand with me. Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. The fight's just beginning, and you won't believe what's coming. The Maplewood sheriff's promise to find Richard was a flicker of hope, but his shadow still loomed over us, a storm that refused to break. I was 14, my body trembling from the drug he'd forced into me, my soul raw from years of his abuse. Margaret's fierce embrace that night had shattered the silence I'd kept, but the nightmare was far from over. Richard was out there, a fugitive fueled by rage. If you're still here, feeling this terror grip my heart, thank you. Comment, "I'm here," below, and let's stand against this darkness together. Smash that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. October 1969 was a battlefield. Each day a fight to breathe in that Maplewood cabin. The sheriff's deputies scoured Colorado, but Richard had vanished, his tracks cold in the mountain passes. Margaret wouldn't leave my side, sleeping on my floor, her sewing scissors under her pillow. "He won't touch you again," she'd whisper, her voice fierce, but her hands shook as she stitched, her eyes darting to the windows. The town turned on us. Neighbors whispered, "Margaret's lying," their doors slamming shut. Church ladies clucked. She drove him away with her crazy accusations. I was a pariah, my torn dress and drugged haze proof of nothing to them. "They don't know," Margaret would say, her voice breaking. "They didn't see what I saw." I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, my nightmares a loop of Richard's smirk, his knife, his voice. "You're mine." The sedative's after effects lingered. My hands shook, my vision blurred, my body a traitor. Margaret took me to Dr. Monroe, Maplewood's only doctor, her face grim as she ran tests. "It's a heavy sedative," she confirmed, her voice soft. He could have killed you, Clara. She found bruises, scars, evidence of years of abuse, her eyes wet with pity. We'll document this for the sheriff, she said, but I saw her doubt. Maplewood protected its own, and Richard was one of them. Nora Evans, my lifeline, stayed by my side, her hazel eyes blazing with rage. He can't hide forever, she'd say, her switchblade tucked in her pocket. She'd sneak me cookies, her parents unaware of the storm down the road. One evening, she pulled me to her orchard, her voice low. I heard he's in Boulder, she whispered, her hands trembling. My uncle saw him at a gas station, saying he'd come back for you. My blood ran cold. Boulder was 3 hours away. Too close. He'll kill me, I sobbed, my body shaking. Nora hugged me tight. We'll get you out first, she vowed, her voice steel. I'll help you run. Margaret and I planned our escape. Denver, Colorado, where her cousin, Aunt Ellen, lived, far from Maplewood's whispers. We'd sell the cabin, pack what little we had, and flee. But Richard's threat hung over us, a noose tightening with each day. One night, a rock shattered our window, a note tied to it. You can't hide, Clara. My scream woke Margaret, her face pale as she read it. He's watching, she whispered, clutching her scissors. The sheriff doubled patrols, but Maplewood's mountains were vast, a maze for a man like Richard to hide. November brought a lead. Sheriff's deputies found Richard in Boulder, holed up in a motel, his arm bandaged from Margaret's scissors. He's armed, the deputy warned, his voice grim. And he's asking for you, Clara. My heart stopped. He wanted me back, his obsession a fire that burned across miles. The deputies planned a raid, but Richard slipped away, leaving blood-stained sheets and a note. I'll find my doll. Margaret sobbed, her hands trembling as she packed our bags. We leave tomorrow, she said, her voice fierce. I won't let him near you. We fled at dawn, our cabin sold for scraps, our lives crammed into 2 suitcases. The bus to Denver was a steel lifeline, its engine rumbling as we boarded, my jar of coins clutched tight. Margaret held my hand, her eyes scanning the crowd, her scissors in her purse. He won't find us, she whispered, but I saw her fear, her guilt, a weight she couldn't shed. The bus rolled through Colorado's mountains, each mile a fragile hope, but Richard's note burned in my mind. I stared out the window, Maplewood fading, my heart racing. Would Denver be far enough? Denver's skyline loomed after a day's ride, a gray promise of safety. Aunt Ellen met us at the station, her face lined with worry. You're safe now, she said, her voice warm, but I couldn't shake Richard's threat. We moved into her small apartment above her flower shop, the scent of roses a stark contrast to Maplewood's despair. I worked in the shop, arranging bouquets, my hands steadying with each day, but fear was a constant pulse. Margaret found work at a bakery, her scissors always near, her eyes haunted. I failed you, she'd whisper at night, tears soaking her pillow. I should have seen. A month later, the sheriff called. Richard had been spotted in Fort Collins, asking about us, his knife glinting as he bribed truckers. He's coming south, the deputy warned, his voice tense. My stomach churned. He'd never stop. His obsession of fire-crossing mountains. Nora wrote, her letter trembling. He came to my house, Clara. Threatened me to find you. I sobbed, guilt clawing at me. Nora, Margaret, Ellen all paying for my escape. Margaret barred the doors, her face grim. We'll fight him, she said, her voice steel. You're my daughter, and I'll die before he touches you. The hunt was on. Richard's shadow a storm closing in. I was a fugitive in my own life, my freedom a fragile thread. This battle's at its breaking point, and the next twist will crush you. Don't turn away. Smash that like button, subscribe, and comment. I'm here to stand with me. Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. The fight for my life is raging, and you won't believe what's coming. Richard's hunt was a firestorm closing in, his shadow chasing us from Maplewood to Denver, a predator refusing to let me go. I was 14, my heart racing with every creak in Aunt Ellen's apartment, my mother's scissors, a constant reminder of the monster we'd fled. His threats, scrawled in blood-stained notes, were a noose tightening around my neck, and the news of him in Fort Collins set my world ablaze. If you're still here, feeling this dread choke my soul, thank you. Comment, I'm here below, and let's fight this battle together. Smash that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. December 1969 was a war zone. Denver's gray streets a fragile refuge. Aunt Ellen's apartment above her flower shop was a fortress, its walls thick with the scent of roses, but Richard's reach was a specter seeping through. I worked in the shop, arranging bouquets, my hands trembling as I scanned every customer, half expecting his gray eyes to glare back. Margaret took double shifts at the bakery, her scissors in her apron, her eyes haunted. "He won't find us," she'd whisper, but her voice shook, her guilt a weight she couldn't shed. The sheriff's updates were grim. Richard had vanished from Fort Collins, his trail cold, but his threats echoed. "I'll find my doll." Fear was a living thing, clawing at me with every shadow. One night, a customer lingered too long, his eyes sharp, his voice low. "You from Maplewood, kid?" he asked, leaning close. I froze, my heart pounding. "Richard's spy?" "No, sir," I lied, fleeing to the back, my hands shaking as I clutched a pair of shears. Ellen saw my panic, her face grim. "He's out there, isn't he?" she whispered, barring the door. I nodded, tears falling, my jar of coins now useless in this new prison. Nora's letters stopped. Her parents had moved her to Boulder after Richard's threat. Her absence a void I couldn't fill. January 1970 brought a chilling discovery. The sheriff found Richard in Colorado Springs, just 2 hours away, his knife glinting as he bribed a trucker. "He's heading to Denver," the deputy warned, his voice tense. "He's asking for Clara." My blood ran cold. His obsession had crossed the state, a fire burning through miles. Margaret sobbed, her scissors trembling. "We can't run forever," she said, her voice raw. "We'll fight him here." Ellen called a lawyer, Mr. David Walsh, a stern man with sharp eyes, specializing in family law. "We'll get a restraining order," he said, his voice steady. "He can't come near you." The order was granted, but paper couldn't stop a monster like Richard. February 1970, the storm broke. I was trimming roses in the shop when the door slammed open. Richard stood there, his gray eyes blazing, his knife gleaming, his arm scarred from Margaret's scissors. "Found you, doll," he growled, his smirk a death sentence. I screamed, the vase shattering, petals scattering the floor. Ellen lunged, her shears raised, but Richard shoved her, her head hitting the counter with a sickening thud. "Stay out of this!" he roared, his knife slashing the air. I ran to the back, my heart pounding, but he was faster, grabbing my arm, his grip bruising. "You're mine!" he bellowed, dragging me toward the door. Margaret burst in from the bakery, her apron stained, her scissors in hand. "Let her go!" she screamed, her voice a primal roar. She charged, her scissors grazing his shoulder, blood blooming red. Richard roared, shoving me to the floor, his knife aimed at her. "I'll kill you both," he snarled, but a customer, Mr. Walsh, stormed in, a pistol from his car in his hands. "Drop it, Bennett!" he shouted, his voice steady. Richard froze, his eyes darting, his knife clattering to the floor. "You'll pay for this," he spat, but Walsh held firm, the pistol unwavering. "You're done," he said, as sirens wailed, Denver police flooding the shop. The officers cuffed Richard, his face twisted with rage, his threats a venomous hiss. "This isn't over, Clara," he roared as they dragged him out, his blood staining the floor. I collapsed, sobbing, Margaret's arms around me, her scissors trembling in her hand. "It's over, baby," she whispered, tears soaking her apron. Ellen groaned, blood trickling from her temple, but she smiled weakly. "We got him," she said, her voice faint. Walsh lowered the pistol, his eyes soft. "You're safe now," he said. But I couldn't stop shaking. Richard's voice echoed, a specter I couldn't escape. The arrest was a victory, but the scars Richard left were a weight I couldn't shed. Margaret held me, her tears mixing with mine. "He can't hurt you anymore," she whispered, but the road ahead was steep. "This fight's at its zenith, and the next twist will shatter you. Don't turn away. Smash that like button, subscribe, and comment, 'I'm here' to stand with me." Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. The battle for my freedom is raging, and you won't believe what's coming. Richard's arrest in that Denver flower shop was a chain finally snapped, but his venomous scream, "This isn't over, Clara," was a specter that refused to let me breathe. I was 14, my body still trembling from the drug he'd forced into me, my soul raw from years of his abuse. Margaret's arms around me that day were a lifeline, her tears a vow of protection. But the nightmare was far from over. Richard's obsession was a fire that burned even behind bars. If you're still here, feeling this terror grip my heart, thank you. Comment, "I'm here" below, and let's stand against this darkness together. Smash that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. February 1970 was a crucible, each day a battle to reclaim my shattered self in Denver, Colorado. Aunt Ellen's apartment above her flower shop was a fragile sanctuary, the scent of roses, a stark contrast to Maplewood's despair, but Richard's shadow loomed large. The Denver police had him in custody, his knife and blood-stained clothes evidence of his violence, but his threats echoed in my mind. Margaret wouldn't leave my side, her sewing scissors tucked in her apron, her eyes haunted by guilt. "He's locked up, Clara," she'd whisper, her voice trembling. But I saw her fear. She knew Richard's rage wouldn't be caged easily. Ellen kept the shop locked, her face grim. "He's a monster," she'd say, her head still bandaged from his attack. "But you're safe now." I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My nightmares a loop of Richard's smirk, his knife, his voice. "You're mine." The sedative's after effects lingered. My hands shook, my vision blurred, my body a traitor. Margaret took me to Dr. Larson, a Denver pediatrician, her face grim as she examined me. "It's a heavy dose," she confirmed, her voice soft. "He could have killed you, Clara." She found bruises, scars, evidence of years of abuse, her eyes wet with pity. "We'll document this for the trial," she said. But I saw her concern. Richard was a predator, and predators didn't stop. The police found more evidence in Boulder. Richard's motel room held photos of me, stolen from our cabin, his obsession laid bare. Nora Evans, my lifeline from Maplewood, wrote letters, her words trembling. "I'm safe in Boulder," she said. "But he came for me, Clara. He's unhinged." My stomach churned. Nora, Margaret, Ellen, all paying for my escape. I sobbed, guilt clawing at me, but Nora's courage fueled me. "You're stronger than him," she wrote, her hazel eyes flashing in my memory. I clung to her words, but fear was a constant pulse. One night, a call came. Richard had attacked a guard in jail, his rage spilling over. "He's screaming for you," the officer warned, his voice tense. "We've moved him to solitary." My blood ran cold. His obsession was a fire burning through steel bars. The trial began in April 1970, a Denver courtroom, a battleground for justice. I had to testify, my voice trembling as I recounted 7 years of abuse. The touches at 7, the kisses at 9, the drugged tea at 13, the night Margaret caught him. Richard sat there, his gray eyes locked on me, his smirk a knife in my gut. His lawyer, a slick man with cold eyes, tried to break me. "You never told anyone, did you?" he sneered, his voice dripping with doubt. "I told Nora," I said, my voice steady despite my fear. "And he threatened me." The prosecutor presented the evidence, my scars, the sedative in my system, Margaret's testimony, Ellen's injury, the photos from Boulder. The jury's faces were grim, their verdict swift. 12 years for aggravated assault, child abuse, and attempted kidnapping. Richard's roar as they led him away, "I'll come for you, Clara," was a dagger in my chest. but his cuffs were a chain I'd prayed for. Margaret held me, her tears mixing with mine. "He can't hurt you anymore," she whispered, but the scars he'd left were a weight I couldn't shed. We left the courtroom. Denver's spring air a fragile promise, but Richard's threat lingered. The judge granted a permanent restraining order, but I knew 12 years wasn't forever, and Richard's obsession was a fire that wouldn't die. We stayed in Denver, Aunt Ellen's apartment our haven, but Richard's shadow stretched long. Margaret worked tirelessly at the bakery, saving to move us to a safer place, her scissors always near. I helped in the flower shop, arranging roses, my hands steadier, but my heart racing at every stranger. One evening a letter arrived, no return address, Richard's handwriting. "I'll find you, doll." I screamed, the paper falling, my body shaking. Margaret burned it, her face pale. "He's in prison," she said, her voice fierce. "He can't touch us." But I saw her fear. We weren't free, not yet. In 1972, Richard appealed his sentence, claiming unfair bias, his lawyer arguing I'd exaggerated. My stomach churned. His lies were a poison seeping through bars. Mr. Walsh, our lawyer, fought back, presenting new evidence. A prison letter Richard wrote, detailing his plans to take Clara back. The judge denied the appeal, adding 2 years to his sentence, but the letter chilled me. His obsession hadn't faded. Margaret sobbed, her hands trembling. "We'll keep fighting," she said, her voice steel. "You're my daughter, and I'll protect you." The years crept by, Richard's shadow a constant threat. I was 16, my freedom a fragile thread, my life a battlefield. This fight's at its breaking point, and the next twist will rip you apart. Don't turn away. Smash that like button. Subscribe and comment "I'm here" to stand with me. Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. The battle for my life is raging, and you won't believe what's coming. Richard's letter from prison, "I'll find you, doll," was a dagger that kept me on edge. His obsession a fire that burned through steel bars, threatening to shatter the fragile peace we'd built in Denver. I was 16, my heart still racing from years of his abuse, my body trembling at the thought of his release. Margaret's fierce determination to protect me was a lifeline. But the nightmare wasn't over. Richard's shadow was a storm that refused to die. If you're still here, feeling this terror grip my soul, thank you. Comment "I'm here" below, and let's fight this battle together. Smash that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. March 1972 marked 2 years since Richard's sentencing, but his presence haunted us in Denver, Colorado. Aunt Ellen's apartment above her flower shop was a sanctuary. The scent of roses, a fragile shield against my nightmares. But his letters kept coming, smuggled out through a corrupt guard, each one a venomous promise. "You can't hide forever," he'd write, his handwriting a noose around my neck. Margaret burned them, her hands trembling, but I saw her fear. She knew Richard's rage wouldn't fade. "He's locked up," she'd whisper, her voice fierce, but her eyes darted to the windows, her sewing scissors always near. Ellen hired a private investigator, Mr. Carter, a gruff man with a scar on his cheek, to track Richard's prison connections. "He's planning something," Carter warned, his voice grim. "He's got friends on the outside." I couldn't sleep, my nightmares a loop of Richard's smirk, his knife, his voice. "You're mine." I'd wake screaming, Margaret rushing in to hold me, her tears mixing with mine. "He can't hurt you," she'd soothe, but the scars he'd left were a weight I couldn't shed. I worked in the flower shop, arranging bouquets, my hands steadier, but my heart racing at every stranger. School was a battle. I'd flinch at loud voices, my grades slipping as fear consumed me. My teacher, Mrs. Ellis, noticed, pulling me aside. "You seem distracted, Clara," she said, her voice soft. I wanted to tell her, but Richard's threats echoed. "I'll find you." So I lied. "I'm fine," my voice hollow, my eyes betraying the truth. In 1974, the storm broke again. Richard escaped during a prison transfer. a corrupt guard turning a blind eye for a bribe. The news hit like a thunderbolt. The sheriff called, his voice tense. "He's out, Clara," he warned. "He's armed and he's coming for you." My blood ran cold. His obsession had broken through bars, a fire burning across Colorado. Margaret sobbed, her scissors trembling. "We'll run again," she said, her voice raw, but I saw her exhaustion. She'd been fighting for years. Ellen packed our bags, her face grim. "We'll go to Cheyenne," she said, her voice steady. "My brother has a farm there." But I knew running wouldn't stop Richard. We fled to Cheyenne, Wyoming that night, a 4-hour drive through moonless roads, my jar of coins clutched tight. Uncle Henry's farm was a sprawling refuge, its fields a stark contrast to Denver's bustle, but fear was a constant pulse. I worked in the barn, feeding chickens, my hands trembling as I scanned the horizon, half expecting Richard's gray eyes to glare back. Margaret baked bread in the kitchen, her scissors in her apron, her eyes haunted. "He won't find us," she'd whisper, but her voice shook, her guilt a weight she couldn't shed. Henry kept a shotgun by the door, his face grim. "No one's touching you here," he said, his voice steel. But I saw his worry. Richard was a predator, and predators didn't stop. 2 weeks later, the sheriff called. Richard had been spotted in Laramie, just an hour away, his knife glinting as he asked about a girl named Clara. My stomach churned. He'd crossed state lines, his obsession of fire burning through miles. Margaret sobbed, her hands trembling. "We can't keep running," she said, her voice raw. Henry called the Wyoming police, his voice steady. "We'll set a trap," he said, his eyes hard. "He'll come here, and we'll be ready." The police agreed, stationing deputies around the farm, their radios crackling in the night, but I couldn't shake the dread. Richard was coming, and I was his prey. That night, I couldn't sleep, my heart pounding as I sat by the window, Henry's shotgun on the table. The moon cast shadows over the fields, each rustle a threat. At 2 a.m., a figure emerged from the darkness. Richard, his gray eyes gleaming, his knife in hand. "Clara!" he roared, his voice a death knell. I screamed, Henry grabbing the shotgun, Margaret lunging with her scissors. "Stay back!" Henry shouted, firing a warning shot into the air, the boom echoing through the night. Richard froze, his smirk chilling, but the deputies charged, their flashlights blinding, their voices sharp. "Drop the knife, Bennett!" they yelled, guns drawn. Richard laughed, his voice a snarl. "You can't keep her from me!" he roared, lunging toward the barn, but the deputies tackled him, his knife clattering to the ground. They cuffed him, his face twisted with rage, his threats a venomous hiss. "I'll always find you, Clara!" he screamed as they dragged him away, his blood staining the dirt. I collapsed, sobbing, Margaret's arms around me, her scissors trembling in her hand. "It's over, baby," she whispered, tears soaking her dress. Henry lowered the shotgun, his eyes soft. "You're safe now," he said, but I couldn't stop shaking. Richard's voice echoed, a specter I couldn't escape. The recapture was a victory, but the scars Richard left were a weight I couldn't shed. Margaret held me, her tears mixing with mine. "He's gone for good," she whispered, but the road ahead was steep. "This fight's at its breaking point, and the final twist will rip you apart." Don't turn away, smash that like button, subscribe and comment, "I'm here to stand with me." Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. The battle for my freedom is raging, and you won't believe what's coming. Richard's recapture on that Wyoming farm was a chain finally locked tight, but his scream, "I'll always find you, Clara," was a specter that refused to fade, his obsession a fire that burned even in cuffs. I was 16, my heart still pounding from years of his abuse, my body trembling at the thought of his return. Margaret's arms around me that night were a shield, her tears a vow to protect me, but the scars he'd left were a battle I couldn't escape. If you're still here, feeling this terror grip my heart, thank you. Comment "I'm here" below, and let's stand against this darkness together. Smash that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. March 1974, marked 4 years since Richard's first sentencing, but his escape had shattered our fragile peace in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Uncle Henry's farm was a fortress, its fields a stark contrast to Denver's bustle, but fear lingered like a shadow. The Wyoming police had Richard back in custody, his knife and blood-stained clothes evidence of his intent, but his threats echoed in my mind. Margaret wouldn't leave my side, her sewing scissors tucked in her apron, her eyes haunted by guilt. "He's locked up for good now," she'd whisper, her voice trembling. But I saw her fear. She knew Richard's rage wouldn't die. Henry kept his shotgun by the door, his face grim. "He won't come back," he said. But I couldn't shake the dread. Richard was a predator, and predators didn't stop. I couldn't sleep, my nightmares a loop of Richard's smirk, his knife, his voice. "You're mine." I'd wake screaming, Margaret rushing in to hold me, her tears mixing with mine. "He's gone, Clara," she'd soothe, but the scars he'd carved ran deep. I worked on the farm, milking cows, my hands steadier but my heart racing at every stranger. School was a battle. I'd flinch at loud voices, my grades slipping as fear consumed me. My teacher, Miss Carter, noticed, pulling me aside. "You seem on edge, Clara," she said, her voice soft. I wanted to tell her, but Richard's threats echoed. "I'll always find you." So I lied. "I'm fine." My voice hollow, my eyes betraying the truth. In May 1974, the second trial began in Denver, a courtroom battle to ensure Richard stayed caged. I had to testify again, my voice trembling as I recounted 7 years of abuse. The touches at 7, the drugged tea at 13, the night Margaret caught him, his escape, and hunt for me. Richard sat there, his gray eyes locked on me, his smirk a dagger in my gut. His lawyer tried to break me, sneering, "You're making this up for attention, aren't you?" I shook my head, my voice steady, despite my fear. "I told Nora," I said. "He threatened me." The prosecutor presented the evidence. My scars, the sedative in my system, Margaret's testimony, the prison letters, the escape attempt. The jury's faces were grim, their verdict swift, an additional 10 years for escape, attempted kidnapping, and assault, totaling 22 years. Richard's roar as they led him away, "You'll never be free, Clara," was a venomous hiss, but his cuffs were a chain I'd prayed for. Margaret held me, her tears mixing with mine. "He's gone for good," she whispered. But the scars he'd left were a weight I couldn't shed. We left the courtroom, Denver's spring air a fragile promise, but Richard's threat lingered. The judge extended the restraining order, but I knew 22 years wasn't forever, and Richard's obsession was a fire that wouldn't die. We returned to Denver, Aunt Ellen's apartment, our haven, but Richard's shadow stretched long. Margaret worked tirelessly at the bakery, saving to buy a small house, her scissors always near. I helped in the flower shop, arranging roses, my hands steadier, but my heart racing at every shadow. One evening, a call came. The prison guard who'd helped Richard escape was arrested, revealing Richard's plans. He'd bribed others to track me after his release. My stomach churned. His obsession had roots, a network of evil I couldn't escape. Margaret burned the report, her face pale. "He's locked up," she said, her voice fierce. "He can't touch us." But I saw her fear. We weren't free, not yet. In 1976, Richard tried another appeal, claiming mental instability, his lawyer arguing for a reduced sentence. My stomach churned. His lies were a poison seeping through bars. Mr. Walsh, our lawyer, fought back, presenting new evidence. A prison journal Richard kept, detailing his plans to reclaim Clara. The judge denied the appeal, adding 5 more years for perjury, totaling 27 years, but the journal chilled me. His obsession hadn't faded. Margaret sobbed, her hands trembling. "We'll keep fighting," she said, her voice steels. "You're my daughter, and I'll protect you." The years crept by, Richard's shadow a constant threat. I was 18, My freedom a fragile thread, my life a battlefield. This fight's at its zenith, and the final twist will shatter you. Don't turn away. Smash that like button, subscribe, and comment "I'm here" to stand with me. Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. The battle for my freedom is raging, and you won't believe what's coming. Richard's extended sentence, 27 years, was a lock on the cage he'd built around my life, but his shadow lingered in my heart, a scar I couldn't erase. I was 18, my body still bearing the weight of his abuse, my soul raw from the terror he'd sown. Margaret's arms around me after that Denver trial were a lifeline, her tears a promise of a new beginning, but the road to healing was a steep climb through a storm of pain. If you're still here walking this path with me, thank you. Comment, "I'm here" below, and let's rebuild together. Smash that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. June 1976 marked a fragile dawn in Denver, Colorado, Aunt Ellen's flower shop apartment, a sanctuary after Maplewood's hell. Richard's imprisonment was a chain I'd prayed for, but freedom felt like a whisper I couldn't trust. I worked in the shop, arranging roses, my hands trembling at every stranger, expecting his gray eyes to glare back. Margaret took shifts at the bakery, her sewing scissors retired, but her eyes haunted, her guilt a shadow. "I should have seen sooner," she'd whisper, tears falling as she kneaded dough at night. Ellen kept the shop locked, her head still scarred from Richard's attack, her smile a balm. "You're stronger than him, Clara," she'd say, her voice warm, but my nightmare screamed otherwise. Healing was a jagged path. Nightmares woke me screaming. Richard's smirk, his knife, his voice. "I'll always find you." I'd bolt upright, my heart pounding, Margaret rushing in to hold me. "He's gone, baby," she'd soothe, but the scars he'd carved ran deep. Ellen suggested therapy, introducing Dr. Susan Hayes, a gentle woman with warm brown eyes and a voice like a lullaby. "You're not broken, Clara," she'd say, her office a safe haven where I poured out 7 years of pain, the touches, the drug tea, the nights I couldn't fight. "Healing takes time," she'd remind me, teaching me to breathe through panic attacks, to name my fear. Slowly, I learned to sleep without lights, to eat without nausea, to see myself as more than a victim. Denver's bustle was my camouflage, but Maplewood's ghosts followed. I'd flinch at tall men with gray eyes, my heart racing, but Margaret and Ellen were my shield, their love a fortress. I returned to school, a small high school near Ellen's, my grades climbing as I buried myself in books. History became my escape, stories of survivors who rebuilt, who fought, who won. Margaret saved every penny, dreaming of a house of our own. "We'll start fresh," she'd say, her hands steady as she frosted cakes, her smile a spark of hope. I helped in the flower shop, tying bouquets, my laughter returning in small bursts, my hands steadier each day. At 19, I met Thomas Reed, a young doctor who visited the shop for roses, his blue eyes kind as he bought a bouquet. "You have a gift with flowers," he said, his voice soft. We talked over coffee, his stories of healing a light in my dark world. He became a friend, then more, his patience a balm, his respect a gift. "I'll never hurt you," he'd promise, holding my hand, giving me space to heal. In 1978, I graduated high school, Thomas at my side, clapping louder than anyone. Margaret framed my diploma, her tears proud. "You did it, baby," she whispered, her bakery thriving, her dream alive. That year, Thomas proposed, not with grand gestures, but with quiet sincerity over a walk in Denver's park. "I want to build a life with you," he said, his eyes steady. I hesitated, fear whispering, Richard's voice, my scars, but Thomas's love was a light I couldn't resist. "Yes," I whispered, tears falling, imagining a future I'd never dared dream. We married in 1979, a small ceremony in Margaret's bakery, her cakes the sweetest gift. I wore a dress she'd sewn, her hands trembling with joy. "Be happy, Clara," she said, adjusting my veil, her eyes bright with hope. In 1980, I gave birth to Anna, a girl with Thomas's blue eyes and my stubborn spirit. Holding her, I felt something heal, a piece of me I thought Richard had stolen forever. "I'll protect you," I whispered, vowing she'd never know the pain I had. 2 years later, Caleb arrived, a boy with my smile, his laughter a melody in our small Denver home. I became a nurse working at Thomas's clinic, determined to give others the healing I'd fought for. Safe, loved, free. Margaret moved closer, her bakery thriving, her visits filled with cakes and stories. "You're a warrior, Clara," she'd say, watching Anna and Caleb play, her smile a victory over our past. But Richard's ghost lingered. In 1985, he sent a letter from prison. No return address. His handwriting a gut punch. "I'll be out soon, doll." I sobbed, the paper falling, my body shaking. Margaret burned it, her face pale. "He's locked up," she said, her voice fierce. "He can't touch us." But I saw her fear. We weren't free, not yet. This story's rising from the ashes, but the next twist will inspire you. Don't turn away, smash that like button, subscribe and comment, "I'm here to stand with me." Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. The journey's not over, and you won't believe what's coming. Richard's prison letter, "I'll be out soon, doll," was a specter that kept me on edge, but I refused to let his shadow steal the life I'd fought to build in Denver. I was 25, a mother to Anna and Caleb, a wife to Thomas, a nurse healing others while mending my own scars. Margaret's fierce love and Ellen's quiet strength were my anchors, but the road to freedom was a battle I waged every day. If you're still here, walking this path with me, thank you. Comment, "I'm here" below, and let's rebuild together. Smash that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. By 1985, Denver had become my haven, Aunt Ellen's flower shop, a place of peace where I'd arrange roses with a steady hand. But Richard's threat lingered, his release date looming like a storm. I threw myself into nursing at Thomas's clinic, helping patients with the care I'd craved as a child, each smile a victory over my past. Anna, at 5, drew pictures of our family, her blue eyes sparkling with joy, while Caleb, at 3, toddled after her, his laughter a melody in our home. "You're an amazing mom," Thomas would say, his hand in mine, his love a light through my dark memories. But I'd wake at night, Richard's voice echoing, "I'll be out soon." Margaret bought a small house near ours, her bakery thriving, her visits filled with cookies and hugs. "You've made a beautiful life, Clara," she'd say, her eyes bright, but I saw her guilt. She'd never forgive herself for not seeing Richard's abuse sooner. Dr. Susan Hayes, my therapist, helped me face those scars, teaching me to forgive, not Richard, but myself. "You survive because you're strong," she'd say, her voice a balm. Slowly, I learned to look in the mirror without seeing Richard's shadow, to hold Anna and Caleb without trembling, to love Thomas without fear. In 1990, Richard was released early for good behavior, his parole a gut punch after 20 years behind bars. I was 30, my heart racing as the news hit. He'd served only 15 years, his obsession a fire that hadn't died. Thomas fought for a new restraining order, his voice fierce. "He can't come near you," he promised. But nightmares returned. Richard's smirk, his knife. I told Anna and Caleb the truth at 10 and 8, sparing the worst, but teaching them safety, consent, respect. "You're the bravest mom," Anna said, hugging me, her eyes wise beyond her years. Caleb nodded, his small hand in mine. "We'll keep you safe," he said, my heart swelling with their love. At 35 in 1995, Richard found me. He showed up at the clinic, his gray eyes gleaming, his face lined but his smirk unchanged. "I told you I'd find you, doll," he growled, his knife glinting in his belt. I screamed, patience scattering, Thomas lunging with a scalpel. "Get out!" he roared, but Richard laughed, his voice a snarl. "She's mine!" he bellowed, advancing. I grabbed a chair, swinging it at him, my voice raw. "I'm not yours!" I screamed, years of fear turning to fury. Thomas tackled him, the scalpel grazing his arm, blood blooming red. Security rushed in, cuffing Richard, his threats a venomous hiss. "I'll take your kids," he roared as they dragged him away, his blood staining the floor. The police arrested him, his parole revoked, adding 10 more years for violating the restraining order and attempted assault. I collapsed, sobbing, Thomas's arms around me, his scalpel trembling in his hand. "He's gone, Clara," he whispered, tears in his eyes. Anna and Caleb ran in, hugging me tight. "We love you, Mom," they said, my heart breaking and healing at once. That night, I vowed to protect them, to never let Richard's shadow touch their light. Margaret held me, her tears mixing with mine. "You fought him," she whispered, her voice proud. "You're free now." At 70, I faced a ghost from Maplewood, Mrs. Eleanor Gray, a neighbor who'd suspected Richard's abuse but stayed silent. She found me through Thomas, her face lined with guilt. "I failed you, Clara," she said, tears falling. "I want to make amends." She helped me share my story on a podcast, Survivors Speak, my voice reaching others, breaking the silence I'd kept for decades. "You're not alone," I said, hoping to save another girl like me. Richard died in 2000, a stroke in prison, his death a final lock on my past. I felt peace, not joy, but peace, knowing he'd never hurt anyone again. My scars remain, but they're medals of courage now. Anna's a doctor, Caleb's a lawyer, both fighting for justice in their own way. Margaret passed in 2010, her bakery a legacy of love. Thomas and I grew old together, our love a light through the dark. This story's rising from the ashes, but the lessons I've learned will inspire you. Don't turn away. Smash that like button, subscribe and comment "I'm here" to stand with me. Share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. The journey's not over, and you won't believe what's coming. That podcast, Survivors Speak, and Mrs. Eleanor Gray's amends were the final steps in breaking the chains Richard had forged around my heart, a testament to the life I'd built from Maplewood's ashes. I'm Clara Bennett, now 70, sitting in my Denver kitchen with a cup of tea, untainted, a symbol of peace after years of terror. My journey through that nightmare shaped me, but it didn't define me. I chose to rise, to heal, to love. If you've stayed with me through this storm, thank you. Comment "I'm here" below, and let's find light together. Smash that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. It's 2025, and I'm Grandma Clara to 7 beautiful grandchildren, their laughter a melody that drowns out Maplewood's screams. Anna and Caleb are my pride. Anna heals bodies as a doctor. Caleb fights for justice as a lawyer. Their father, Thomas, my rock, still holds my hand, his blue eyes a constant light. We built a family on love, not fear, a legacy that breaks the cycle Richard tried to chain me to. Margaret's bakery lives on in my recipes, her courage in my heart. She passed in 2010, but her whisper, "Be happy," guides me still. I share this story not for pity, but for every girl trapped in silence thinking there's no way out. There is, and I'm here to show you how. What did I learn? First, find your inner strength. It's there, even in your darkest hour. Dig deep, for yourself, for your kids. I survived Richard by clinging to the hope of a better tomorrow, even when I couldn't see it. Second, speak your truth. Find someone you trust. Break the silence, because your voice can shatter the chains of abuse. Nora gave me that courage, and it saved me. Third, heal through time and support. Therapy, loved ones, even strangers like Mrs. Gray can help you reclaim your life. Susan taught me to breathe again, to see myself as whole. Fourth, protect your family. Stand up, even years later, to shield those you love. I fought Richard to keep Anna and Caleb safe, and I'd do it again. Apply these today. Reach out, speak up, heal, and fight. You're stronger than your scars. I never told Anna and Caleb Richard's name. He's a shadow from the past, a lesson in what not to be. Their blue eyes hold only love, not his curse, a testament to the family I chose. I'm grateful for Margaret's fierce love, Nora's bravery, Thomas's patience, Ellen's shelter, my true family, built on care, not blood. They taught me that healing isn't erasing pain, it's transforming it into strength, into love, into a life worth living. My work as a nurse, my podcast episode, they're my way of giving back, of helping others find the light I fought for. Now at 70, I share this on the Grandparents' Tales channel, my voice steady, my scars a map of triumph. Why now? Because silence is a prison I won't carry to my grave. I speak for the Claras out there, suffering in shadows, thinking they're alone. You're not. Your pain doesn't define you. It fuels your courage. If this story touched you, do me a favor. Smash that like button, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Let's build a chain of warriors. Share this with someone who needs hope, and if you can, leave a super thanks to keep these stories alive. Just type amen below to let me know my words reached you. What's next? A tale of a grandmother's fight for justice that'll leave you stunned. Click the video popping up now and don't miss it. My grandchildren fill my days, their love my reward, but this story's for you. You're stronger than your past, braver than your fear. Take that step, whisper or roar, and live. Maplewood's gone, burned to ash in my heart, but Denver's mine, my family's mine, and this life's ours. I chose healing, not hate, freedom, not fear, and I'd choose it again. Until forever, new light. Thank you for listening. But before I go, let me leave you with one final thought. The greatest act of courage isn't surviving the storm. It's choosing to bloom after it. I was a girl in a cage, drugged and broken, but I became a woman who fought, who loved, who lived. Anna and Caleb are my proof. Proof that evil doesn't win, that love does. My podcast reached thousands, saving girls I'll never meet, and that's my legacy. Margaret taught me to fight. Nora taught me to speak. Thomas taught me to love, and I'm teaching my grandchildren to do the same. So to every survivor out there, you're enough, you're worthy, you're free. Don't let your scars silence you. They're your story, your strength. One last thing. I've started a fund, Clara's Light, to support abuse survivors with therapy and safe homes. If my story moved you, consider donating through the link below. Every penny helps another girl find her voice, her healing, her light. Together we can break the chains for others, just as mine were broken. Thank you for being part of this journey, for standing with me, for believing in the power of light over darkness. You're my heroes, and I'm honored to share this with you. Until next time, hold on to hope. It's the strongest weapon we have.